I'd like to first of all welcome the wonderful Kush from SKG Consulting. She's kindly given up her time today to join us and answer some critical questions around how you can implement systems to ready your RTO for these new standards and ensure that you're basically operationally fit under the new standards for RTOs. Welcome, Kush.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure today to be co-hosting this webinar with you. And thank you so much to the whole team of eSkilled for working behind the scenes to organize this webinar. It's been great for all of you. Before we dive in, I just want to give a little bit of background about who I am and why I'm so passionate about this sector. I've spent nearly 18 years in the vocational education sector, and I've been working closely with the RTOs, CRICOS, and other ELICOS providers. Over this time, we've had first-hand challenges that the providers face when they navigate through the legislative landscape. And I've had the privilege of helping them turn those challenges into useful opportunities. Alongside the compliance work that we do, I'm also a CPA and a chartered accountant. So that combination of compliance expertise and the financial acumen, that's always been an invaluable resource for us when it comes to supporting the providers. Because we're not just talking about meeting the standards, but we're talking more about building sustainable and resilient businesses that can thrive and grow. Through SKG Consulting, our mission has always been very simple to make compliance practical, scalable, and embedded into the operations of the training providers. It needs to become the second nature of the RTO to be compliant rather than just having a last minute action item. Compliance is not just a one off project that can be carried off within the RTOs. We need to live and breathe compliance when we talk about compliance within the RTOs. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Kush. Yeah, look, so thanks, Kush. It's really great to have you share your real world experience and particularly given your financial background. I think that serves you in really good stead for really understanding not only the business framework, but the compliance frameworks that RTOs work within. I just wanted to share some pretty, I guess, shocking facts that I uncovered when I was looking at ASQA's 2024 to 2025. It's the first half of this financial year report. I was really amazed to see that of 175 performance assessments, 139 of those performance assessments or audits, as we previously knew them, were non-compliant. That's an increase of 60% non-compliances at performance assessments in a single year. It's massive. Of those 139, of those 175, only 134 providers were actually able to successfully return to compliance. So that means just in the first half of this year, we lost a lot of RTOs due to their inability to manage compliance. So I think these stats are pretty crazy, and I think we, as RTO managers, compliance managers, CEOs or executive team, we need to be really mindful that the risk environment is great, and under the new standards, the risk or governance risk is now fully strengthened, and really the onus is put on RTOs to ensure their compliance across the new standards, and particularly around governance, and we'll be talking a bit about that later. So Kush, in your opinion, what are the major changes in the standards that are going to make it even more important for RTOs to have robust compliance systems in place?
Uh, Thank you for that question, Scott. I think that's a burning topic that we are listening these days. Everyone we're meeting. So under the 2025 standards, compliance is no longer a tick box approach. It cannot be, it's not something that, you know, you can just leave it on the checklist or the tick box or completing a form or a document. It, it is something that you live and breathe through the systems that you're developing within the RTO and within your business. And that cannot be achieved in a single day unless you implement the systems on a regular basis. Systems, they are going to be your safety net and they're going to be your springboard as well, because you have to develop the systems, you have to keep on revisiting the systems. They do not just record what you're doing, but they also provide you tangible and auditable evidence documents at the end of the day. It shouldn't be something that, you know, you just have it in your mind that okay, you have a good intention to deliver quality training, but what does that really mean is what the 2025 standards are decoding for us. Because the shift is definitely massive. We are moving from input based compliance, which used to be that, okay, this is the plan and we've got a plan in place. Now we're moving more towards the outcome based approach, where we talk about that, okay, this is the evidence for us to deliver the quality training, and this is how we have done it. So we often see ourselves quoting that you have to question yourself at every process within the RTO of how are you performing a certain system or how are you delivering quality training. And as long as you're able to answer that how within the process, you will be okay in developing a sound and foolproof system within the RTO. When
Yeah.
the
Okay.
systems are
So,
actually, yeah,
so
when the systems are there in the you know, day-to-day operations of the RTO, you'll automatically achieve compliance in the long term. Yes.
yeah. So the goal, I guess, is to centralize, automate, link everything back to the performance and learner success, right? To the RTO performance and learner success. That's critical. Um,
Yep.
So let's go to the standards and explore quality area one. Kush, can you tell us what RTOs can do to ensure that they meet the quality area one standards under the new RTOs?
Yes, definitely, Scott. And quality area one, which is actually the heartbeat of any RTO, I always say, because it's everything that you talk about: training, delivery, assessment practices, facilities, resources, industry engagement, and validation. That kind of becomes the center of the stage for any RTO. It actually sets the standard of how do you ensure that quality outcomes for your learners are being achieved within the RTO. So it's no longer about having a training and assessment strategy just like a document or a template in place, which is not being referred to by your staff, by your trainers. What you can demonstrate in practice is now in the front and center of your training and assessment strategy. What does that mean? That means that systems, processes, and evidence trails need to be monitored as and when you deliver the training. So your TAS is no longer a planning document, it's an evidence of intent, structure, and compliance that you intend to meet within your training and assessment practices. To meet the revised standards, your task must be very well structured. It needs to be sequenced to support the learner progression across the full duration of the course. It also needs to be designed to provide sufficient trainer led learning and practice time. That's a very crucial shift in the new standards, because earlier there was not much stress on the practice time during the training time of the delivery of the qualification. But now the whole focus is on how much practice time do we give to the learners within the training time that we are allocating for the learners. So even before they jump into the assessment, they need to have sufficient practice time within the training and assessment phase of the delivery. And the
Yeah, right.
delivery,
So time
yeah,
to practice. So those formative assessments are going to be absolutely critical, right? So
very,
you shouldn't
yeah,
just be jumping into assessing students without having evidence that they've actually had an opportunity to practice the skills and knowledge that they've learned, and having those formative assessments on file in your LMS. Uh, is critical evidence to show that students have had that opportunity to practice prior to assessment to prepare them for assessment.
Very critical. And
Oh, have we just lost?
sorry,
Oh,
no,
oh,
no,
go.
all yeah, sorry. So what I was saying is, even with the practice time, we've had a recent experience during the audit activity where specifically we had to, map the session plans to demonstrate exactly how we are providing the practice time to the learners. So as you've rightly said, Scott, it's very, very critical to focus on the formative assessments and making sure that they're correctly mapped within the training time.
Yeah, right.
So
And there's also a bit of a focus, or I guess a much strengthened focus around facilities, resourcing, equipment. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
yep. So within the TAS, it is very important that whatever facilities and resources are required for a particular qualification, they need to be properly mapped. We need to exactly know what facilities are required for the effective delivery of the qualification, and they need to be mapped to each and every unit of competency and completely detailed and reviewed in a timely manner within the training and assessment strategy. Also, how do you factor in the learner needs, risk, and support requirements into the basing and design of your task is very important.
So,
Again,
Kush, I'm really surprised. Like, we're in 2025. Obviously, we've got a very mature vet sector, but still, and as I pointed out in the stats earlier,
hmm,
RTOs still failing performance assessment or audit over and over again in the area of training and assessment, which is, to me, it's mind-boggling.
yep,
Um, Things like not addressing all the requirements of the unit of competence, skills being assessed using knowledge-based assessment tools, evidence collected being insufficient, not current, not authenticated, assessors accepting work that's copied, plagiarized, assessors interpreting benchmarks inconsistently, or no benchmark or marking guides at all for assessment tools.
hmm.
How do how do we improve as a sector? How are we going to fix this problem? Because we keep blaming the regulator, but obviously the RTOs have really got to step up and improve in this area. Can you give us some tips on how we're going to turn these stats around?
Oh, I think, Scott, you're asking me a million-dollar question here. I wish I had a straightaway answer to that and a solution to that. I would do it overnight. But as long as the assessment and delivery, they are definitely one of the biggest compliance risks that we see within the RTOs. And I think where we go wrong is in the rush and not having a proper plan and not having a proper system when it comes to picking up on the assessment and delivery of the courses. Because if we do not do a proper plan within the training and assessment strategy, and if we do not have a proper plan on the pre-validation of the assessment tools and a proper validation schedule for the assessments that we have, then the systems they start failing because we implement the course resources, the unit resources, without having a proper contextualized version of the units. And then they go into the system and we start gathering the student assessments. But let's go back one step back. We'll come to the assessment part later. Let's go one step back within the quality area and wrap up the training and assessment and move forward from there, Scott, just to kind of align it with the slides that we're running so we don't lose the audience there. So wrapping up with the training and assessment, I would say the key elements that we have discussed are that it needs to be well structured, it needs to be designed to provide sufficient trainer led learning and practice time, and then the delivery mode needs to be aligned for the training product as well. For examples, if we are talking about a qualification like certificate 3 in individual support, and that requires a practical component, it's very heavy on the practical. So we need to make sure that we do not develop a training and assessment strategy which enables to deliver that qualification 100% online. That will just not be correct to do it. And then we must also clearly show how the training supports the learners at each stage. How do you factor in the learner needs, risk, and support requirements into the pacing and design of your task? Again, the basics will still remain the same, that you need to version control all the documents, you need to have approval history for your task documents, and you also need to link it up with the current facilities, trainers, and other learning resources. They all must be embedded into your task document. Your task is definitely an auditable document. It has to be a living record, and it cannot be a template sitting away from the training team. Another important aspect that we cover in the quality area one is the industry engagement, where we do see a lot of gap even today with a lot of providers. And that is often because we see either the industry engagement is weak, or it is only done as a once-off process at the time of adding the scope of the qualification. So within the 2025 standards, it is very clear that it's about ongoing and documented engagement that actually will shape up the quality of your training. So this impacts everything from your TAS updates, assessment tools, learning materials, and facility reviews. When you go to industry, you shouldn't just be talking about what to put in the TAS. You need to check with them what sort of resources do you need to deliver this qualification. And it's not just about maintaining the logs and meeting minutes with the industry. We need to learn to close the gap and to make sure that it's not just having those consultations, but showing that how did the industry feedback actually inform the updates that you're making within your training and assessment strategies.
Yeah, I agree, Kush. So your industry engagement has got to be real. It can't be one of those things that you do to tick a box. And like Kush said, that industry engagement, the evidence that you're taking from industry or getting through your industry engagement needs to be logged. And spreadsheets are one way of doing that. But the problem with spreadsheets is they don't often go far enough in terms of ensuring that you're going to stay up to speed. So I really recommend reviewing your industry engagement system. You want to log every training program that you deliver in your industry engagement system and engage and record every interaction with industry, the participants, discussion topics covered. Allow your system should allow you to upload against each industry engagement evidence, either meeting minutes or whatever evidence you've gathered, whether it's emails, surveys. Um, against that program to show that you've got the industry engagement. But more importantly, any insights gained from your industry engagement need to be then recorded in your continuous improvement system, so you can show how you've taken that industry engagement and you've implemented it in your organization. If you don't have that connection, you're going to really struggle to show at audit how you've taken that industry engagement and implemented it into your organization. And obviously the final part of that, like Kush was saying earlier, which is obviously updating that TAS, updating your resources, making sure in your version history logs in each document, you link that back to your continuous improvement and industry engagement logs. So you've got that full auditable history of how your industry engagement has really improved the quality of your training and assessment. And that really is often the missing link. RTOs are often doing industry engagement, but often it's I've got to do it, so I'll go and get a survey, or I'll go and get some meeting minutes. But it has to go further than that now. You can't. That won't suffice. It might have worked in the past at audit. It won't work anymore.
Yep. That's right. That's right, Scott. And moving on to one of the other major updates that we talk about within the 2025 standards is the stress and the clarity that's been given on the facility, resources, and equipment. It's always been there in the previous standards also, but it's been kind of underlying, and we've been talking about the checklist and having a facility checklist, making sure. But now it is very black and white, that you need to have fit for purpose facilities and resources to run a qualification. Then they all need to be safe and accessible, and they have to be sufficient. So we need to have processes around, whether we are doing a digital delivery, then we need to have all the digital resources in place. If we are doing a practical simulated environment sort of delivery, we need to make sure whatever requirements are there in the simulation, they're properly met, and we've got proper records and logs and registers to monitor the same. So now the management, it increases the responsibility and accountability of the management of the RTOs as well, because they need to have documented evidence and a monitoring and reviewing sort of training resources and facilities system in place. Only having the photos and videos of the facility is not going to kind of map or get you out of this clause, unless you have a system that you continuously visiting the facilities requirements, because that would change with every intake that you're taking within the RTO. If the student numbers are increasing, you need to go back and revisit the facilities and resources that you have in place, because you'll have to rework the numbers that are required for the facilities. So it's very important to close those gaps and have a system in place, and also link that system with your continuous improvement cycle as well, because at the end of the day, it's about tying everything together back to the learner outcomes. And 2025 standards are very clear that you must not only intend to deliver quality, but you also have to show consistently that you're doing so within the systems in place to monitor, improve, and validate it at every point.
So it's also important, and that the validation is a really important point. One of the big changes in the standards is around a risk-based approach to validation. So if that's something that you haven't maybe noted, definitely make a note of that. So what that means is that your RTO needs to identify their training products or units that are high risk and schedule more frequent validation on programs that have high enrollment volumes, poor
Yep.
student outcomes. So you've got to be looking at your completions. If you've got programs with poor completions, they're high risk, and industry critical or high risk qualifications. So if any of your programs fit those categories, you need to be able to show how you've done a risk assessment across all of your programs and units and identified which ones are high risk, and then show how that you're scheduling much more regular validation and more units. So in the old standards, it was considered a training product was considered validated if you validated 2 units of a qualification. Okay, that's no longer the case. Now you need to show that your sample size of validation of units based on risk in that program. So something like aged care, for instance, that Kush mentioned earlier, obviously it's all over the news at the moment, a lot of the problems in that industry. Training is obviously a big focus. You would want to be making sure probably you're looking at most units in that qualification, given the current risk environment for that qualification. So you not only do you need to do that, but you need to justify it and you need to document it in your validation system. Kush, any other validation tips you can provide us? Because that's really been strengthened in the standards.
You've covered quite a bit, Scott, and you've actually mentioned a very valid point there, and that's very, very important to make note of. That it's not just about validating your course resources or validating the unit assessments. You have to have a risk-based approach. You need to see where do you have maximum enrollment volumes. You need to pick up those units and bring them forward in your validation schedule. And then same goes for the high risk qualifications. So, and you need to have that documented. What is your risk-based approach? On what basis are you prioritizing certain units in your validation plan? That needs to be very black and white again. So anything that we think or do within the RTO, it needs to be on paper, and it needs to be documented so that it's not left to assumptions that it was just a thought. Coming back to what exactly are you validating? So you have to pick up the assessment tools that needs to be validated, and then you also need to validate the actual student submissions. Assessment tools, obviously, we validate them whether they're valid, reliable, fair, and flexible. I'm sure we are all across the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence here. But with the student submission, again, we need to make sure that whatever student submissions are coming in, they're meeting the rules of evidence, and we have sufficient and current, authentic, and valid student assessments when we are validating them. Now, I often get asked, what is it that we need to retain as part of the evidence for the validation records? So we definitely need to keep back the validation reports, the validation outcomes that we're getting. We must also collectively keep the participant records that we are validating. So we should not get rid of the student assessments with the rule of 2 years window. When we are keeping them for the validation evidence, we hold on to them and we keep them for a longer period. And then all these actions, they need to be tied back into your continuous improvement register, and the evidence of updated tools based on whatever comes out from the validation reports, they need to be version controlled and they need to be saved back in your drives. And we need to make sure that whatever outcome is coming from the validation is actually implemented prior to the next rollout of those units within the RTO. Because if we are not doing that, we are building twofold non-compliance over there, because we're documenting that there's a gap in the validation report. And by not making the changes in the assessment tools, we are then multiplying the non-compliance and rolling it out to the next intake. So it becomes very, very high compliance risk if the validation is not done with a proper intent and with a proper process in place.
Yeah, I think the key is also there, taking those outcomes from that validation session need to feed straight into your continuous improvement register. That way they're logged, they're assigned to someone, there's an owner, and you've got that, again, that linkage of that what you're doing in your validation is actually being implemented within your RTO, and it's in a single log. Basically, your continuous improvement system is your ultimate friend under these new standards, because everything needs to feed in there. And when ASQA comes to audit you, as long as you're keeping that up to date and maintaining and ensuring you're doing stuff, you're going to have the ultimate audit log, because basically you can spend most of your time just sitting in your continuous improvement system and showing how you've implemented industry engagement, implemented validation, implemented suggestions from students, staff, etc. All of it should be in your continuous improvement register. Just on the validation scheduling front, that can be a real challenge, maintaining that schedule given the rules. So obviously you've got to have 100% of your training products validated within 5 years, 50% within 3 years, and obviously that's a rolling rule. So whilst you might be up to date, if you're not maintaining that schedule and maintaining that implementation of that schedule, you can quickly come unstuck, because if you're not continually scheduling in front of yourself, you can literally fall short of that target and be no longer compliant. So to help RTOs out, we're actually working at eSkilled in our student management system. We're building a validation scheduling system. It'll have a dashboard that highlights if your future schedule is not doesn't meet the 5-year requirements, and it will also highlight visually to your compliance staff whether your backwards or your current validation schedule is out of overdue. So you've got to maintain really that schedule backwards, current, I should say, not backwards, current and forward. So the other thing that the scheduling system will do is collect and collate all of that evidence into your validation event. So things like record all the participants, their qualifications, your validation reports, assessment records, assessment tools, all of that evidence will be, you'll be able to upload into your validation event. The system will send reminders to anyone involved in those validation events, and also obviously notify you if anything doesn't happen, so you don't fall into that situation where trainers haven't got together and done that validation and no one knows about it. And suddenly you don't have the evidence, and 6 months later somebody figures out, and it's really hard to catch up when you get behind in validation. So the critical thing is staying on top of it, scheduling everything in advance, and making sure those things happen, and that the evidence is being recorded. Because our system already has a trainer matrix built into it, when you add participants into a validation event, it's going to tell you whether the participants hold the required validation requirements across that participant team. So yeah, ideally you've got some kind of dashboard that keeps you in check in terms of whether you're on track looking forward, and also looking at your current validation schedule and that's on track. So just moving on to quality area 2, Kush. What are your thoughts in terms of some of the big changes there?
One of the standout shifts, Scott, is definitely with the LLN and the digital skills requirement, the assessment requirement that needs to occur before the enrollment is actually confirmed. Most of the RTOs, they do have some system in place for the LLN process currently. But to be honest, we've seen a divide between the RTOs where this process is actually completed after the offer letters are issued to the learners. That's not going to meet the new compliance benchmarks and the new requirements of the 2025 standards. And the second challenge that we have is the digital skills, because a lot of RTOs, they do not have the mechanism to assess this. Even though the digital capability, it directly affects a student's ability to access an online content or submit assessments or even to communicate with the trainers. So in this regard, what the standards are really saying is that your LLND skill assessment, it must be tailored to the training product. A one size fit all assessment on your website is not going to suffice in the new standards. You must be able to demonstrate that the assessment is actually relevant to the AQF level and the vocational outcomes of the qualification that you're testing for. And the results are actually used to determine whether the learner has the capacity to engage before they are enrolled into the course.
Yeah, and I
If,
think that's,
yeah,
go, Kush.
if that is not the case, then your RTO will be expected to either offer a targeted support, or you need to recommend an alternate pathway for the student. Yes, Scott.
So and I think that's really the key, is that prior to enrolment change, because yeah, I think most RTOs have always had some form of L&D assessment as part of their enrolment process, but now it has to happen before they're accepted as an enrolment in your student management system and in your LMS. And obviously, yeah, there's the new digital skills component as well.
Yeah.
What we've done to in terms of systems to manage that, because really I think before you're even accepting funds or fees from that learner, that this assessment has to happen. Or if you have accepted the fees, obviously you have to have a process for refund if they don't meet the requirements. I think that's right, isn't it, Kush?
That's correct. That's correct. Definitely. So there has to
So
be a system in place. Yeah.
So, yeah, what we've done is basically build a system where students enroll through the online enrollment form. The application for enrollment comes into the student management system. The student management system will then trigger an enrollment into the LLND assessment in eSkilled's LMS. The results from that L&D assessment come back to the SMS. If the student has passed the L&D assessment, it will automatically trigger in the SMS to enroll them in their course. So basically that whole end-to-end process is streamlined from start to finish without needing people needing to be involved. Obviously, you still need an assessor to assess some of the reading tasks, the written tasks, the written assessments. But once that assessment has been done, the results will automatically update to the SMS, and the student can automatically be enrolled into their course if they pass. If they don't, our system will flag whoever your L&D support staff is in your organization to get in touch with that student and provide them the necessary support or guidance that they need to complete that course. If there's a situation where the student's L&D needs are greater than your organization can deliver, obviously that communication would be made to the student and recorded in the student management system. If you are able to support them within our L&D section on the student profile, your L&D support staff would create their support plan, and that support plan is automatically displayed to trainers in their events. So in their class events, for anyone in their class that has L&D needs, they can see that support plan in every single class. So your trainers know exactly what support they need to provide learners. So it's an end-to-end solution where everything connects, and really that's going to give you the evidence that you need to show that you've got a system for supporting learners in their L&D prior to them being enrolled, which is really critical under the new standards, one of the really big changes. So what about like student support in general? Kush, what do we know about the changes there?
So student well-being and diversity, it all needs to be embedded throughout the student journey, and the support needs to be visible and it needs to be verifiable. One of the biggest pitfalls that we see within the RTOs is that trainers will give extra help, support will be there for the students, but then there are no records of that support being provided to the students. And under the 2025 standards, if there is no evidence to table, then it is assumed that the support did not happen. So if you're supporting a learner, our simple message is documented, which includes chat logs, emails, phone calls to the students, whatever summary is there, the direction to the staff should be. Each and every communication with the student is not a personal communication. So whatever communication is happening, it needs to get into the logs of the students on the student management system. The delivery schedules and the trainer notes and everything, that again needs to go back to the logs. Any support the trainer is providing in the class, it needs to be locked into the student management system again. Any meetings being completed with the students, whether it is a support intervention meeting or a course progress meeting, again it needs to be documented and it needs to be put back on the system. Plus, you need to make sure that all the support guides, handbooks, and all the information related to student support is easily accessible to the students. And that
Yeah,
includes the complaints and appeals as well.
yeah. Ideally, yeah, they want to be in the student portal where students can just access them at any time, right? If they've got a query or a question around policy or procedure, they shouldn't have to go looking for those, and student portal makes sense for storing all of that information. Complaints and appeals, I think that's a big area that we've noted as a systems provider for you to have a look at. The new standards really point out that you have to have a systematic approach to complaints and appeals. So a lot of RTO, I would say if you've got a complaints and appeals policy and procedure, it's probably something to have a look at and look at your systems for managing that. What we've done in eSkilled is about 3 to 4 months of development to add additional functions and features to our complaints and appeals processes within the student management system. So students can log a complaint or an appeal. The system will automatically give them a confirmation that that complaint has been received, which can outline to them what your complaint procedure is for handling that, or your appeals procedure is for handling that. So they get that information straight away, which they need to be given. whoever is responsible for managing those complaints and appeals within your system will automatically be tasked and notified by email with a task to process or investigate and respond to that complaint or appeal. So and things like automations where if whoever's been assigned to that complaint or appeal hasn't responded to that complaint or appeal within your organization's response time, and that's written into your policies and procedures, they can be flagged prior to it becoming a non-compliance. So, hey, that's due in 2 days. So you're not getting to a point where your evidence of processing complaints or appeals is different to what your policies and procedures say, and that happens so often because often RTOs just don't have the checks and balances in place. So I really recommend automating that system as much as possible to ensure that you can't be in a situation where you respond to complaints or appeals outside of what your policy says that you will. ASQA is always looking for those types of issues, and particularly that's been strengthened under complaints and appeals under the new standards. So yeah, student support matters, and obviously, like Kush said, your SMS is your best friend for all that evidence. You've got most student management systems, including eSkilled, will give you the ability to record notes. They automatically store emails and student text messages, and if you take a call on the phone, make sure you put it into notes on the student record. If trainers are dealing with students in person, make sure they put a note in the system that they've done that. You've got to have the evidence. Like Chris said, it's great. A lot of RTOs are actually doing this as standard, right? That's what we do. We're training organizations. But when it comes to audit, and ASQA says, show us your support that you've provided the student, they often don't have the evidence despite having done that task. And that's where they become non-compliant. It's not necessarily that they're not doing it, but they don't have the evidence. So it's all about evidence, and systems are your best friend, and ensuring staff are using those systems effectively is critical. So you got to monitor it. Do spot checks on your student records. Make sure that in your audits and your audit process, make sure that that information is being logged up, so when you get audited, you've got the evidence there. So vet workforce, can you tell us a bit about the changes there, Kush?
Okay, so wet workforce again, because we talk about people, it's the heart of the RTO, and now we need to make sure that all the credentials, all the records that you gather for the trainers, they're validated, they're all current, and they need to be mapped for each and every unit of competency that the trainer is engaged for. This is where we've also seen a lot of RTOs falling short, because it's not that the trainers are not qualified. It's just that there's no system in place to show that those qualifications actually align at the unit level for each and every requirement of the unit, and meeting the assessor requirements for each and every unit of competency. So the suggested compliance system around maintaining the trainer records will be to have a very robust credential management system. This could be your internally developed system, and I'm sure Scott will also talk about some of the abilities of eSkilled within that domain. But you need to not just rely on the folders sitting on a desktop when you're engaging a trainer or when you're onboarding a trainer. The system should have the ability, whatever system you adapt, it should have the ability to trigger alerts for you before the evidence actually expires. Or if there are supervision arrangements in place, it should also be able to track the supervision arrangements for you. You need to have proper logs of induction and ongoing PD development for the trainer. And if there are any gaps in the currency of the qualifications of the trainers, those gaps should also be triggered by the system. So mapping the trainer and having a robust matrix for the trainers is non-negotiable within the new standards. Having the evidence of currency again is a very important aspect, because you cannot just have an employment letter from an employer to demonstrate the currency of the trainer. You need to make sure that the trainer is actually engaged with the industry. You need to validate the employment records you're getting. You need to have a system to validate and verify the currency that you're receiving from the trainers. Again, another important aspect would be to have a PD register and to maintain an ongoing PD records for the trainers, and to have a customized PD plan for the trainers, not just a template rolling out for the full 12 months period for all the trainers with the same PD. That's not going to work in the new standards again. And then the verification system, where you have a system in place to verify and validate all the records that you're receiving from the trainer, whether you keep it through the USI verification or you contact the previous employers or the RTOs who are issuing their qualifications. But that loop needs to be closed to demonstrate that each and every piece of document that you're getting has been properly verified before actually engaging the trainer and finalizing the trainer.
Absolutely
So,
agree. Those systems are super critical, and I think just touching on that verification system, because that's really been something that's been strengthened in the new standards. You're going to want to have evidence of that process. So yeah, ensuring that trainers aren't just uploading their evidence with no scrutiny. Just remember, this is one of the biggest areas for non-compliances for RTOs, along with the training and assessment tools typically. So, it just shows that current systems that RTOs are using are not working. And Kush pointed out a really critical point: making sure that your trainer matrix or your trainer credential system will notify trainers prior to their evidence expiring. The moment it's expired, the moment that PD is no longer current, or that industry engagement is no longer current, or that unit's been superseded, you have a non-compliance.
yep.
So you need to, what we've built into our trainer matrix is automations, where basically we recommend setting every evidence to expire, even if it's a SOA, every 12 months. So that it gets at least some scrutiny, even if it's a unit of competence that it's just been changed, and you're not expecting a unit to be updated for 4 years. Set it to expire so it gets reviewed in 12 months time, to make sure that it wasn't superseded. Sometimes they supersede units within a year, so we need to have our systems and notifications. So our system will notify not only the trainer but your compliance staff of any evidence expiring. It expects to see PD currency, industry currency, and credentials mapped to every unit, and that's really critical. You actually have to show credentials for every unit, industry engagement for every unit, and PD across the scope of the training and assessment qualification as well. So you need to be selective around the types of PD you're running, to ensure that you're covering the scope of that trainer role, and that's often something that goes amiss, because we're just haphazardly organizing PD without properly lining up PD to job roles, and that's also been strengthened in the standards. So whatever system you're using, trainer credential management system, in our system we call it a training matrix, so that's what it was always called. But in the last in preparation for the standards, we've built in all these automations to notify and task stuff out, and so you can see within the compliance system and in eSkilled now any tasks incomplete. So if a trainer's got a task to update something, your compliance team can see it if it's overdue, and that will show up in overdue tasks across the system, so it just can't get missed. So yeah, having that system in place to manage that is critical, and I think it's the one area. Again, it's not necessarily that trainers aren't qualified, don't have the PD, but the evidence is typically not there. So your evidence gathering system, your credential management system, is going to be super critical in ensuring that you can meet that requirement. Kush, I'm just going to jump a little bit over the PD requirements, because we've touched on it, but just because we're running a bit short on time. But just note, everybody, that PD is not just limited to staff to your trainers anymore. All of your staff need to maintain their professional development for the role that they're doing in your organization. Something to have a look at. So let's jump into governance, Kush, because obviously that's probably the biggest area of change I see, because it now, obviously governance goes across every other standard as well, but it's been super strengthened. What can you tell us about governance?
So governance is basically where it all comes together, Scott, because it's more than just the leadership part. It's more about embedding a full culture of compliance within the RTO, starting from an informed decision-making process. Good governance would start with making sure that you gather the data, you analyze the data, you are using the insights, and you're managing the risks based on whatever you're gathering. So you must have systems in place to collect and collate data from all the stakeholders and sources, whether it's complaints and appeals, validation outcomes, student, staff, or employer feedbacks, or we talk about completion and withdrawal rates, or any other as per reports or information that is coming through to us. We need to analyze the trends and have a summary of the key findings within the RTO for a good governance system. If we are not using the inputs or the feedbacks that we are getting from across all the operations that are happening, and if we are not plugging them into a good continuous improvement system, we are not going anywhere, and we're not making any improvement, and we're not making any changes to the system, then it's going to be very hard to survive within the 2025 standards, because your CI system should track the source actions, the people who are responsible for taking actions, and they need to have due dates and closures on when the actions are happening. Because if that system is not working for you, you'll definitely have gaps in demonstrating how you're maintaining self assurance within the RTO. And then you also need to have timely reminders going back and forth from the CI system, so that the actions are not left in between. And then there has to be a regular review of the records and the actions taken within the governance meetings within the management.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've said how important the continuous improvement system is, and again, it's another area that we've done a lot of work on in here at eSkilled. But whatever system you're using, it really wants to notify staff if things aren't done. Because again, a lot of organizations have spreadsheets for tracking and continuous improvement, but the problem with spreadsheets is that people don't necessarily update them and nobody knows about it. Things aren't done. You can have manual processes, obviously, for reviewing those, but obviously that leaves a lot to chance for people remembering to do that, human error. So I definitely recommend ensuring that you've got a continuous improvement system that notifies staff if things aren't done, notifies staff when they're received. So just giving you some we talked about collecting and collating all that data from staff, just to give you some ideas around that and the extent of that you would want to have within your systems. I'll use eSkilled as an example of how we do that, but obviously you can apply that to whatever systems you're using. So eSkilled has I think I spoke earlier about a complaints and appeals process that students log into their portal. They can, submit a complaint. Someone's automatically notified. That goes into the complaints and appeals management system. So you've got that log automated, and staff are notified. If things don't get done, they're notified. So you've got that collection point for complaints and appeals. Quality indicator surveys, obviously all RTOs have to do them. They're automatically available from the student portal as well, and also links can be emailed out to employers, etc., through automations, and all of that information comes straight back into the reporting system and the student management system. So you've got that, again, that collection of all that critical stakeholder engagement. The key there is not doing that, but also making sure that at your management meetings you're looking at that information, and that information is feeding back into your continuous improvement register. Same thing with industry engagement. Our industry engagement management system will collect all that evidence, notify people, task things out to make sure things get done. And again, feedback from students, trainers, employers. You've got to collect feedback from all of those stakeholders in our student management system, from the student portal, trainer portal, company portal. Every stakeholder has a feedback form that submits straight into your continuous improvement register. So you don't even need to put it there. Someone will be automatically notified to review that and assess whether something needs to be changed or implemented. And so you've got that full record automatically in the place where everybody is interacting. The problem, I think, with spreadsheets is, we end up with so many spreadsheets in organizations. Nobody remembers how to access the spreadsheet, where it's saved, and things just don't happen. I think your systems need to live and breathe where your staff are. It's got to be easy. Kush, the compliance mindset, what is that about from a leadership perspective?
Compliance, Scott, it cannot just be folders on the drive, and we've spoken about it throughout the session today. It needs to be integrated within the systems. So it cannot be a standalone document or a standalone folder sitting on your drive. To enable this, you can also have regular compliance calendars, like a full compliance calendar for all the activities that you plan to do within the RTO. It needs to show that you're reviewing your training and assessment strategies regularly, you have learner support processes in place. So you've got time allocated for each and every activity that is crucial for ensuring compliance with each and every standard. You've got to put in time for the review of your existing processes and policies that are in place. And most importantly, it's very, very, very crucial to record everything you learn from these reviews and keep all the version controlled documents in place and record every change that you're making within the RTO, whether it's a policy change or a learner support change, and or an assessment update or a training and assessment strategy update. Log all your improvements in the CI system and link all these updates directly back to your feedback, validation outcomes, and regulatory advice that is coming through in an ongoing basis, as in when you have the performance reviews. That's going to be the key foundation of a systematic compliance culture within the RTO, I would say, moving forward.
Yeah, one of the things that thanks, Kush. One of the things that we're doing for document reviews in our system is we're strengthening our document management system, which we should be releasing in the next 6 weeks, hopefully. That's what we're doing there is that we're just basically integrating our automations engine back to our document management system. And I think that's going to be critical, really, in ensuring that those document reviews happen. So basically, every compliance document we're adding a review date into the system, and that review date can trigger notifications and tasks to staff or management or your leadership team to review those documents. And I think that's really, really critical. Again, if you've got version control, you have a review date and you don't review that document on that date and you don't have evidence, that's a non-compliance because you're not following your compliance management system, right? So we see that as really critical feature upgrade to our compliance document management system currently, and that's going to be really critical. If you don't, so again, if you're not using eSkilled, think about how you can implement those document reviews, systemize those document reviews so they happen across any of your critical compliance documents, TASs, resources, you name it. Any document that is an auditable document should have a review, and depending on the risk of that document, it will need a more regular review. Yeah. Risk is really important, and we're going to talk about that now. Guys, we've gone a little bit over this. There's a lot to get through. We are getting close. I think we'll just continue on. I'm sorry if some of you have to leave, but we will have the recording on the session. We're not too far to go, but the next two quality areas in terms of risk management and leadership are probably the most important. So I do want to cover those. So I think we'll just push on in a bit of overtime, and if you do have to go, we understand, please just do the catch up on these on the video when we send it through. Kush, risk management, probably one of the biggest, I think, risk areas for RTOs is risk management, because
Yeah.
it touches on everything across basically every standard. Can you tell us what are the critical takeaways for risk management in these changes?
Definitely, Scott. And as you've rightly said, risk management is now embedded across every part of the 2025 standards. It's no longer about having a risk register in place with, the high, medium, and low risk rating and sitting in one of the folders. Your RTO needs to have a fit for purpose risk management system. It's important to put a clear risk management framework aligned with the size and scope of the RTO. It's very important that the risk register itself, it tracks the operational training, workforce, and compliance risks that can emerge within the RTO setting. And again, it's very important to have leadership oversight across the risks that are being identified within the system that is being put in place. Because if there's no ongoing monitoring of the risk, then we are again building up non-compliance, because we are identifying the risk and we are keeping it there and we already know that it's a risk, but then we are leaving it for too long to become a non-compliance and fire back at the RTO at any given point. So the goal should be to build a living risk system, one that informs the decision making, and it should strengthen your compliance across all the four quality areas that we've talked about.
I I saw this as a critical thing that we need to address here at eSkilled from a system process perspective, just given the strengthening of risk management in the system. Ideally, we would have had it for the launch of the standards, but we've had a lot to do with these changes. So we are working on a risk management system built into our student management system. And again, whether you use our system or another system, it doesn't really matter, but I'll just tell you some of the key considerations that we've thought about when building a risk management system into our student management system. So obviously, first of all, the risk management system needs to log give you the opportunity to log those risks. And so obviously having the ability to enter those risks, but not only logging the risk, assigning the risk rating to that risk and the likelihood of that risk occurring. So that risk has a score, and let's informs your RTO, your management team, about how closely they need to be monitoring that risk. Obviously, anything with a really high risk rating should be monitored more regularly. Monitoring your risks is a requirement under the standard, so you need to show evidence of that. So whenever you add a risk, you should have a review date with that risk, and you need to make sure that that review happens. So again, our risk management system will notify any system users and task them to review those risks to make sure that they've got the visibility that they need on the tasks that they need to be completed to stay compliant. Every risk that you add to your risk register needs to have also attached to it the controls that you've put in place to mitigate or minimize that risk. And ideally, the situation is that the control is effective enough to get that risk rating as close to zero as possible. So in our system, when you apply a control to a risk, you will add the effectiveness of that control, and you might not need to just have one control. It's likely that certain risks will need multiple controls to mitigate that risk effectively. For instance, vocational placement in high risk areas, you're going to need some risk mitigation strategies there. They should all go into your risk management system with the controls that you've applied. That applies for your entire operations of your business, whether it's training, whether it's staff, whether it's operations. You need to do that SWOT analysis and record those risks in your risk register, and then apply the controls and evidence that the controls are applied, not just a record on a document in the risk register, but actually the evidence that that control is in place. So our system will allow you to also add the evidence that the control is in place. And again, controls need to be reviewed, so every control should have a review date as well. So our system will allow you to do all of that, map every risk to the standards in terms of where that standard impacts you, if it's a risk towards the standards for RTOs. So again, you've got that audit trail of how you systematically manage compliance and risk within your organization. So risk management system, if you don't have a really robust risk management system in place at the moment, whether it's internal in your student management system or an external system, I definitely recommend doing it. It's going to be tough to do that effectively from a spreadsheet, given the new requirements. So lastly, and I've left it till last, even though it's Division 1 of Quality Area 4, Leadership and Accountability. The reason I've left it to last is because obviously leadership in your RTO is the most important consideration and impacts obviously everything to do with your organization and the performance of your organization. So what is the new focus on leadership? Because that's been really changed in the new standards, and ASQA's made it really clear that they want leadership to be accountable. What have you noted, Kush, in terms of what we need to be looking at?
Definitely, Scott. In the revised standards, we've all heard a lot about, the focus on tightening up the fit and proper person requirements and having accountability at the leadership level of the RTO. I think it was long overdue anyway, but with the leaders, that is where we would say that the compliance culture starts within the RTO. Because if we have leaders who are focused on compliance and who can monitor compliance and have the capability to understand the risks involved within compliance, then the whole culture of the organization kind of gets triggered in the same manner. In order to meet the 2025 requirements, the RTOs need to clearly demonstrate that the leadership is accountable through the systems that they have in place. What would that mean for compliance is that we've got very clear position descriptions, we've got very clear KPIs set out for the staff and the managers and the RTO managers and other people in the key managerial positions. Each and every position description should detail what they're accountable for and what are the responsibilities that are allocated to them. Then we also need to have systematic compliance systems across all the operations and standards. We have discussed that throughout our session today. All the leadership decisions that happen within the RTO, they need to be based on the risks and evidence that are being identified across all the systems. So they cannot be random decisions or any random strategic calls within the RTOs. Every decision that is happening needs to be demonstrated with a documented strategy of why it is happening and how it is happening. Now, how is that possible, and what is it that we can do within the RTO to establish that culture of having leadership accountability? We definitely need to have a regular executive management meeting set up within the RTO. Then we also need to be very clear on the agenda items and the discussion items that should be regularly reviewed as part of these meetings. For example, we need to include discussing the trainer assessor capabilities and the credentials that are being gathered, that they're reviewed. That just needs to come as part of the leadership accountability, that they're taking note of all these things and they're being reviewed on a regular basis rather than just leaving it on the side for one or two managers to have a look at. So staff capability.
Kush,
Yep.
just a question on that. Would you recommend leaders for that exec management meeting and oversight meetings, would you recommend having the agenda mapped to the standards?
Definitely, definitely, because that's how you provide clarity to the leaders. Because the more black and white we have, that okay, what are the things that we're looking at, it just becomes easier in the whole trail to document everything, and then having it, because then we all speak the same language throughout the RTO. That's what is needed in the revised standards. That we're not talking different things in the meetings, but operationally we are doing different things. That's where I think the gap starts to happen, because we discuss completely different agenda items. But then when it comes to operational people who are actually performing activities on the ground, they're completely struggling with different things that are not being discussed as part of the management meetings. So all the agenda items, they definitely need to be mapped with the quality areas, with the requirements and the KPIs of the other staff that are being managed under them. And that would include whatever feedbacks we get, they need to be reviewed as part of the management meetings. Training and assessment strategy, effectiveness, what are the gaps, whether they're working or not, what are the struggles that the trainers are having on the floor. Then student engagement and support. Again, if that is not looked at, it is just assumed that the students are getting the support. If it is not on the agenda of the management, then we just keep following whatever system we have. There's no room for improvement over there. Then
Yep. No,
financial viability and forecast would be
I
another.
think that's Oh, sorry. I think that's where your systems feed in as well, isn't it? Because obviously, if you've got those systems in place, reporting to executive management becomes easy because it's just kept up to date in real time. And all exec management team need to do is jump into those systems, and they should see at a glance if there's anything um, out of the ordinary or out of order, right? And I think that's when you start closing the gap. We talked about that massive compliance gap currently that exists in the system, and that compliance gap is just it's risk. It's basically RTOs putting their registration on the line because they haven't got those systems and processes in place. So yeah, I think having those systems. Sorry, I cut you off at financial viability, and obviously that's pretty important, Kush. So I'll let you continue
That's
there.
something that's very close to my heart. So,
Mm.
yeah, definitely. But no, as you've rightly said, Scott, the more information management gets, the more data they have, the more they'll be able to identify the risks in the timely manner. And it's very important in the revised standards that we pick up the gaps in a timely manner and we have a plan to address them. And if we do not put in a system in place to monitor the gaps, then there's no way we'll be able to pick up any issues that are happening within the system. Coming back to financial viability and RTO performance, that's again a very, very crucial space that the leadership needs to monitor, because sometimes if that is not reviewed in a timely manner, there would be qualifications which would be running on losses. And then by the time the management realizes that they need to revisit or they need to take an action, it's already too late for the RTOs, because whether they need to adjust the price of the course or whether they need to look at the resourcing and how can they actually make a qualification viable is only possible if they are doing a proper monitoring of their financial viability of the business. So again, it again comes down to the same vicious cycle that we've been talking about: monitoring the risk, having stress on the CI register. If we have those basics in place, and if the management of the RTO is actually reviewing all the information that is coming through all the departments, there's a lot that we can pick up in a timely manner. And within the RTO industry, if an action is taken within the right time, it can save us a lot of trouble in the long term.
Yeah. So look, my key takeaways from today is there's no silver bullet to compliance, right? Um, You need to look at your current systems, identify risks, close the gaps, build compliance into every system, use technology to collate, analyze, automate, and simplify. Yeah, you've got to get that information from the ground, from your students, trainers, employers, back to your executive management team in a timely manner. It needs to be reviewed monthly, not annually. which obviously is typical in a lot of RTOs. Most of these things are being looked at annually or 6 monthly, or it's just not getting the visibility that it needs. So you're always in compliance. You're not scrambling to be compliant when an audit comes along. So I think we've just got to make a shift in not only our mindset, but our systems, processes, and plan for compliance success. It's actually easy if you've got the systems. If you don't, it's a minefield. So I think, it's got to be easy. Otherwise, there's just too much risk. I'm going to cut short on questions, but don't worry, just because we've gone quite massively over time, there's been a lot to talk about, and I think it's all been really valuable stuff. What we are going to do, though, what we'll do is we'll collate all the questions from the session, and Harmony, who's with us now, will send them across to Kush, and we will respond to all of those questions in an email. So look out for that. We'll definitely answer all your questions, so don't worry, they're not going to go unanswered. If we've touched on some systems and compliance systems that we deliver through eSkilled system. If you want to have a look at how eSkilled can help you manage those compliance risks, scan the QR code there and follow your notes on our website through to the book tour button, and one of our team would love to take you through and show you all of these compliance features with enough time to properly show you how they all work. I want to take this opportunity to thank Kush. Kush, you've given us some amazing insights today, and I really appreciate you taking your time out unpaid to support the vet sector, and so we can lift the game in terms of improving training in vet in Australia. And we're going to be doing a lot more of these talks, but Kush, I really wanted to just extend a warm thank you for assisting us today.
No, thanks to you, Scott, for having this platform set up for all the consultants and bringing everyone together. And thank you to all the providers who have connected with us today. Just a closing thought: never take compliance as a burden on yourself, because the more we think that way, the more it's going to create problems in the long term. Just take it as an opportunity for improvement, and with the right systems and right support in place, you can definitely take that opportunity for continuous improvement within the RTO.
Thanks. And if you scan that QR code there, you can follow Kush on LinkedIn. She shares lots of valuable insights there as well, so you can keep up to date with changes in the industry by linking to her LinkedIn profile. So definitely do that. If you follow our LinkedIn profile, you'll also get updates about further VETtalks. We're running these generally monthly at the moment, so we've got a whole range of different speakers. I think next up we're talking to Hawkeye Consultancy. So yeah, jump on to LinkedIn and follow us there, and you'll get the updates as these events come to hand. A perfect opportunity to get those PD hours up and record those sessions as evidence for your professional development for yourself and your team. Look, thanks everyone. Sorry we've gone over time today, and sorry for those who had to leave early. Next time we'll try and keep a bit more to the schedule, but there was a lot to get through when we're traveling across 4 quality areas in the standards, and obviously we could probably spend a whole day on this topic to get the depth that we need. But hopefully you've got some value out of what we've shared with you today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next VETtalks events. Thank you everyone, and have a great day. Thanks
you.
Kush, and thanks Harmony for the support on the questions and the technical support.
Thank you.
Got it.